A clay cup sat in his hand. The water inside it was cold and clean. He had not eaten since morning. Every person in the room expected him to drink. He did not drink. He sat very still, and then his body gave way, and he fell. The cup hit the ground. The water spread across the dirt floor in a dark, thin line. The broken pieces lay where they fell. Nobody moved to pick them up. The men in the room looked at one another and then looked at him lying on the floor, and none of them spoke. This was Hassan of Basra. He was an old man by this time. His face was lined, his back curved slightly when he sat. He had spent most of his life talking about what a person owes and what a person forgets. And now he was on the floor because of a cup of water. Basra, in that century, was a city of heat. The sun pressed down on it from early in the morning. The rivers nearby gave moisture, but the air was still heavy and close. People moved slowly in the middle of the day. They looked for shade wherever they could find it. Hassan had lived in this city most of his life. He had sat in its gatherings. He had listened to men who had seen things he had not seen. He had asked questions, and he had remembered the answers. Over time, people came to sit near him because he had a way of saying hard things plainly. He did not shout. He did not perform. He sat and he spoke, and the words came out level and slow. People who heard him said that afterward, the world looked slightly different, as though a layer had been lifted from it. Not because he said beautiful things, but because he said true ones. On the day in question, he had been in his room since the early hours. He had not asked for food. A student came to him around midday and sat nearby, waiting to see if anything was needed. Hassan did not speak. He stayed where he was, his eyes open, looking at the wall. In the afternoon, a second student came. He brought a plate of dates and a clay cup filled with water from the well. He set them on the floor near Hassan's knee. He stepped back and waited. This was a normal thing. A person who has not eaten should eat. A person who is thirsty should drink. Hassan looked at the cup. He did not reach for it immediately. This was not unusual. He often paused before things, but this pause was longer than normal. The student watched him and said nothing. The dates sat on the plate untouched. The cup sat where it had been placed. Then Hassan reached down and picked the cup up. His fingers wrapped around it. The clay was cool. The water inside shifted slightly. He brought it up close to his face. He could feel the cold coming off the surface of the water before he had even touched it to his lips. His hand stopped. The cup did not go further. He held it at the level of his chin, and his arm was still, and the water inside was still. The students watched. One of them later said that the silence in that moment felt like something with weight, like cloth laid over the room. His breathing changed. It became slower, and then it became uneven. His shoulders dropped. His grip on the cup loosened. The students were already standing when he fell, but they were not fast enough. The cup left his hand before they reached him. It hit the floor and broke. They brought him back to sitting. They held his arms. One pressed a hand to his back. He was breathing, but his eyes were closed and his face was wet. Not from the water. His own tears had come down his face while he was still holding the cup before he had fallen. They waited. After some time, his breathing became regular again. He opened his eyes. He looked at the broken cup on the floor and at the water that had already been absorbed into the dirt. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at the students. One of the students asked him what had happened. He did not answer right away. He looked at the place on the floor where the cup had been. He put his hand flat on the earth near the wet patch, as if checking that it was real. Then he sat up straighter and began to speak. He said that when he felt the cold of the cup, when the cold reached his fingers before the water had even reached his mouth, something came into his mind. Not a thought exactly, more like a door that opened very fast and let in a great deal of light, and he could not close it. He said the cold of the water reminded him of what he had been given. Not only the water, everything, the air that came in and went out without him asking for it, the ground that held him up, the sight in his eyes, the fact that he had woken up that morning at all. And he said that when all of that came into his mind at once, not as words, but as the full weight of it, he could not hold the cup anymore. His hand simply opened. It was not a choice. The weight of what he had been given was too large to hold, alongside something as small as a cup. The students sat with this for a moment. Then one of them asked, "But you have drunk water many times before. You have held many cups. Why did it happen today with this one?" Hassan looked at him. He said, "I do not know."
He said there are things we receive every hour that we do not account for, because we have received them so many times that we no longer notice them arriving. We treat them as background. We treat them as the floor we walk on, present, solid, assumed.
He was quiet for a while after that. The students did not press him. One of them brought a new cup of water and set it on the floor nearby. Hassan looked at it. He did not pick it up. He let it sit there. After a long time, he reached for one of the dates instead and ate it slowly. Later that evening, the students talked among themselves about what they had seen. They were not sure what to call it. It was not illness. It was not weakness. It was something else. A moment when the weight of a thing became real all at once, and the body could not carry it standing up. One of them said, "He has been talking about these things for years. He has said the same words many times. But today, the words became something he felt in his hand, in the cold of the clay. And that was different. Saying a thing and feeling a thing are not the same distance apart. Think about the glass of water you never think about, the one you fill at the end of a long day or first thing in the morning, still half asleep. You drink it without pausing. You set the empty cup down and you have already forgotten it before your hand has left the cup. That is the normal condition. That is what Hassan broke from for one moment in that room. The comfort you never question, the warmth of a room, the food that arrives, the body that keeps working without your instruction. These are not neutral. They are things being given. They arrive constantly in such large quantities that the mind learns to filter them out. The way the eye stops seeing.
What Hassan felt when the cold clay touched his fingers was the full weight of the account. Not guilt. Not fear. Something more like recognition. A small pleasure, cold water on a hot day,
A small pleasure is enough to bring the whole account to mind. That is the lesson. Not that pleasure is wrong, not that comfort should be refused, but that comfort, felt fully and honestly, carries weight. It points backward to everything that made it possible. The cold of the cup points to the whole of what a life is made of. Hassan did not teach this afterward as a story about himself. He did not repeat it. The students carried it. They remembered the cup on the floor and the broken pieces and the water already gone into the dirt. They remembered that his hand had opened before he fell, that the cup had left.
The cup is still on the floor. The water is already in the earth. What arrived and what was given, those things do not wait to be noticed. They only ask, very quietly, to be felt.